right, folks, welcome back to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. Normally, this is where I say I'm your host, Tim Korkleski, and I'm joined by Nick Bogart, who never talks anyway, but today he's really not going to talk. My co-host isn't even on this damn thing. But today I am joined by Ben Jarvis from Megaton Games. They have an awesome Kickstarter right now called Armoured Syndicate. Ben, how you doing, man?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Hey, not a problem at all. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Megaton Games and Armoured Syndicate and how you guys got started, and we'll kind of go from there, talk about the game, what's cool about the Kickstarter, what's unique about the game itself, and we'll just see where it takes us. Yeah,
that sounds good. Do you want me to kick off and give you the sort of potted history of where we came from? I mean, I got into the industry as a painter mainly. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was one of those geeks hanging out in my local games workshop, painting miniatures, and that was sort of what drew me into it. I was, ironically, as an owner of a games company, I was never that much into the games. I just liked the models, so I sort of come at it from a sort of more of a creative side. I trained in product design. And actually ran a toy design company for quite a while, but always had this wish to get back into sort of miniatures and that side of things. I didn't want to be designing furniture or consumer electronics. I wanted to be designing, women with big tits and swords and guys in armor with big guns and stuff like that. So that was I wanted to come back into it from a creative point of view. I wanted to be sort of doing that kind of stuff for a living. That was my ultimate aim. So yeah, I sort of steered my toy company towards games, unashamedly derailed it in order to just go and do what I wanted to do, really. So so we launched our first game about 3 years ago now, which was actually it was sort of a bit of a weird one. It wasn't really miniatures related. I was going to say, actually, I actually restarted painting sort of competitively about 7 or 8 years ago, and ended up entering Golden Demon and winning various things over the years and made some good friends in the industry, and that was sort of what prompted me to get back into it commercially. So we launched our first game, which was a Lego compatible mech fighting game about 3 years ago. So that was my other passion was Lego building, which is something I loved when I was a kid. So I thought the idea of combining sort of Lego mechs and games was sort of the ultimate holy trinity for me in terms of sort of stuff I liked. So that was our first project, which did quite well. And then, as I said, from then on, we had this idea for something involving sort of mechs in the desert and this sort of whole Wild West mech combat thing. That was an idea I had about 12, 13 years ago. So it's been kicking around for a long time. We finally decided a couple of years back, no, let's actually finally do it. It was one of those things we kept putting off. We thought, we'll have learned more in a few years' time. Let's leave it. And we kept on leaving it. It just got to the point where we thought, no, let's do it now.
Nice. So this has been something you've been wanting to do for a while. Being coming from the toy industry, you had a lot in design. So I take it a lot of what you've learned in school really helped you design the mechs and everything else for the game. And like you when you were talking about doing this initially, you already had a direction in mind as to visually what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, Armoured Syndicate has been sort of influenced by a whole bunch of stuff over the last few years. It was always kind of that we wanted to have this idea of this sort of it started out very much focused on mechs that looked like JCBs fighting each other in the desert. That was the sort of initial visual style. Ironically, the first stuff we've launched hasn't focused on all of the sort of mining and JCB type mechs, though that is all coming later. But yeah, the very first designs I did were all along that theme. But it's subsequently with this whole idea of having these sort of big evil corporations and these guys in suits looking somewhat out of place fighting mercenaries in the desert was sort of a big part of it. So there's influences from all kinds of things there. There's a little bit of the Matrix and a little bit of a little bit of Mad Max and all kinds of things thrown in. So So it's sort of, it's been, I've got this folder on my desktop which is bulging now, which has got about 500 images in it of just stuff I've collected off the internet over the last sort of 5 or 6 years of things that I thought looked cool, renders and sketches and drawings by other people and stills from films and all kinds of stuff. And it's all basically sort of, dusty looking mercenaries in the middle of the desert fighting people with robots. So it's developed its own unique style, but it's come from a lot of different directions.
Cool. So tell us a little bit of the background of Armored Syndicate, because let's face it, most of the people that listen to podcasts are too damn lazy to go read a Kickstarter page.
Yeah, very true. I know I am. The basic idea is it's a slight twist on a familiar theme. The idea is it's set about 110, 120 years in the future. So not like dim, distant sci-fi future, but believable, not that distant future. The idea is that I had this idea and it's worryingly coming true, that you're going to have these big mega corporations which are going to sort of conglomerate into ever bigger and bigger organizations. Google are going to buy out Facebook, and then this Google Facebook hybrid are going to then buy out Disney, and you're going to end up with these enormous companies that do everything. And the idea was that there's going to come a point, when these companies start buying up robotics companies, which they have been doing, where they're going to basically own all the best toys. They're going to own all of the military hardware. They're going to own the media. And everyone's going to wake up one day and realize that the governments basically don't have any control anymore, and the corporations are in charge. So the core idea is that everyone's had that awakening, realized that the governments have kind of lost control, and the corporations have seized on this and basically started open warfare between each other. So it's sort of set in the idea is that global warming has kind of reduced most of the Western US to deserts. So sorry about that. There's nothing personal, but it seemed like a really good setting.
Give it to the Brits to turn the US into an arid shithole. Thanks.
Well, hey, you wanted it for yourselves, so you threw all our tea in the water and we just left. So we're not fussed if it turns to desert now. So, so that's the sort of setting. Is it's sort of Western US, but it's all abandoned cities. So Vegas and everywhere's all been abandoned because it was no longer economically viable to sort of keep these sort of cities going in the middle of a desert. So there's lots of sort of abandoned, crumbling buildings, and it's all sort of outlaws and prospectors and hardened, dodgy people roaming around the desert, and everything's kind of owned by these big corporations who are sort of basically fighting each other over land and resources now, because it's the only thing that's left that's got any value. So that's the sort of idea, is that there's obviously mercenaries. We threw in this whole sort of Latin American side to it. We figured that it would be quite cool to have this sort of civil war going on, and all sort of normal national boundaries have kind of broken down. So we've got the Mexicans involved as well, assuming Trump doesn't build his wall. That they've come in and started getting involved in the whole thing as well. So there's lots of sort of everything's got sort of Spanish themed names and things. So that's sort of there's lots of sugar skulls painted on mechs and things like that. So which was sort of a nice extra little sort of visual side to it that we didn't think anyone had done before. So that adds a little bit of interest to the sort of visual style of it. So so it's essentially it's these sort of desert hardened mercenaries and outlaws fighting against these big evil corporations who are trying to sort of take control of everything. So that's sort of the core idea behind it.
Nice. So what I'm gathering from this is that the different factions that you're going to have in the game are basically all powerful. Like nobody's going to be able to screw with these guys.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to, obviously having sort of desert outlaws versus massive mega corporations is always going to seem like the mega corporations have got like have always got the upper hand. So we've been trying to sort of be very careful to make sure that it is actually fairly balanced. the way we've done that both in the story and in the gameplay is that the desert mercenaries obviously live in this environment. They're used to this environment. All of their hardware is a little bit older, a little bit more analog, like the analog mechs in Pacific Rim surviving when the more advanced ones don't. So all their hardware is a little bit older and a little bit rusty and a little bit battered about, but survives, like the whole thing about, AK-47s being able to be maintained by a Neanderthal with a rock. It's the same kind of thing, that all their hardware is a lot more hardy, whereas these sort of mega corporations have got all this, incredibly advanced stealth technology, but you put it in the middle of a dusty desert and it all starts breaking down. So that's how we've sort of tried to keep the balance between the two sides.
Gotcha. So even though like the more advanced corporation has like all the new sexy sleek black stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do that hot when they're out walking around in the desert. So I like that a lot. That's actually a really cool way of looking at it. It kind of harkens back to like not to bring up another mech game, but like I'm a huge BattleTech fan, so it's very much to me kind of reminiscent of when the Succession Wars started happening, and basically you had mechs that were like aggro mechs, like mining mechs, where it's like these things were designed to be outside and dirty and dusty and grimy. And then they started creating war mechs, which were a lot sexier, but that also meant that they took a lot more maintenance in order to keep going, where an aggro mech, you could just be like, has it got diesel? Yep. Okay. Keep it going.
Yep. Exactly. That was exactly where we came from. Was that idea that, all this stuff. We've got the two initial factions, which were ironically not the first two that we came up with, but yeah, we've got the mercenary gang and we've got the big evil Dromeda Corp, who are the sort of their logo looks worryingly like the Windows logo. I can't think why that is, but yeah, so they're the sort of this big generic evil corporation. We've also got a third faction which we're bringing in later on, which are called Baxter Mining, who are a mining corporation. Sort of, they've got quarries and they've got, as I said, all of their mechs are going to look like, basically walking JCBs that have been retrofitted with guns and stuff. So it's, again, as you say, they're more suited to the environment that they find themselves in than this, very sleek, highly advanced stealth technology, which is all going to start breaking as soon as you get it dusty.
Yeah, that's definitely cool. So tell us a little bit more about the new faction then. Are you able to do that? I know that the Kickstarter right now is only showing the two, but obviously I know you guys want to go a little bit farther than just the Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean we've mapped it out. I mean we're sort of, this is the bit of it that really interests me is this sort of whole idea of coming up with the backstory and coming up with the characters. So me and my friend who sort of came up with the idea sat down a few months back, and we came up with a list of about 40 new characters and like 3 new factions that we want to bring in. As I said, Baxter Mining are kind of they were actually the first faction we came up with. Before all the rest of them, they were actually the first people we came up with. So they're going to be, it's going to be run by this sort of third generation miner called Billy Bob Baxter, who's kind of a redneck done good. So he sort of his father happened to find this sort of seam of tin or something in the mountains in the land that he happened to own. A bit like the sort of, the Beverly Hillbillies. He accidentally struck it rich, and he's sort of inherited this mining company, which he's not that interested in, but he quite likes the idea of going and fighting people with mechs. So he's not a great businessman, but is going to make a very interesting faction, because, as I said, you've got all of these sort of slightly overweight redneck miners with these great big JCB mechs, taking on the big corporations. So they're going to be quite a cool faction. As I said, everything's going to be, look very industrial. We've been going around. I actually went to a quarry near me to go and take photographs of machinery to base all of the designs on. So we're sort of taking it. We're trying to make it. It's important to me that it's all realistic. It's believable. So we're taking a lot of cues from sort of existing technology in order to try and make these mechs look like they could actually work. They could actually exist. So it's not sort of like wild sci-fi. People look at it and go, my goodness, that's actually only a few years away. This could be real. Right.
So in a way, it's kind of reminiscent of the loader mech from, like, some of their stuff is reminiscent of the loader mech from like the Aliens movies, where you look at it and it's kind of like, that kind of looks like a fork truck with legs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
It's going to be, there's going to be lots of styling cues in there. I say, coming from a product design background, that's my sort of thing has always been sort of, communicating ideas visually. So yeah, we're taking literally stealing design elements from how JCB arms work and putting them directly into these mechs. We originally had some designs that were all sort of like quadrupedal mechs that looked a little bit more like animals. But we realized that for people to be able to relate to them and sort of, because the idea is that all of the mechs, whereas obviously a lot of games use mechs almost like tanks, they're kind of pieces of hardware. We, from the very outset, we wanted the mechs to be characters. So they're all semi-sentient. So the mechs can be reasoned with, they can be bribed, they can be made to get angry. So it's very much about the human characters trying to control the mechs. So it's kind of like, well, that's why we've got mech rustlers, and we've got mech hackers, and we've got mech handlers. So they're almost treated like very large, dumb, dangerous animals. So you've got to have humans or other smaller robots looking after them to keep them under control. That was sort of important from the outset, was that we wanted them to be characters. So for that reason, we've gone over to pretty much everything being bipedal now. So it's all vaguely human looking, albeit some of it's quite squat. And we wanted everything to have hands as well. We were sort of looking at everything having built-in weapons, but it looks cooler. We had this idea of it wanting it to have like things that looked like human weapons, like revolvers and swords and things, but just ridiculously oversized. The idea of this like 50, 60 foot high mech holding a revolver that weighs 4 tons and fires like 200 millimeter shells, just seemed really, really cool. And again, it was something we hadn't seen done before. So we wanted this idea of these sort of like ridiculously massive gunslinger mechs that had, handguns that were, as big as a building.
Yeah, nice. The biggest one that stood out to me out of the ones that you've shown so far is probably El Toro. He's the assault mech for the gang. I'm sorry, I forget the name of the Cuervos Muertos.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, he looks really, really cool. The moment I saw that, I was like, okay, there's definitely the Western element to him, because he's got these massive, massive guns that you could tell were, they're not true revolvers, but they definitely have that look of a revolver where it's like he's going to have to reload these bad boys. They're not just arm cannons.
Yeah, absolutely. He was actually, El Toro is actually based on a existing mech design by Phil Dunn, who used to be a designer for Games Workshop. He famously did a lot of Tau stuff a while back, and he's gone on to, he runs his own company now, making and selling mech models in resin. And he already had this design, and we approached him. I was a friend of Phil's for a few years, and I approached him and said, look, that mech would look absolutely awesome in our game. Could you sort of modify it a little bit? And if we wanted to look, because at the time he had variations of it that had sort of weapons built into the arms, and we said, well, look, if we want it to have hands and we want it to look like it's holding 2 pistols, is that doable? And he within a couple of weeks he'd already sculpted it for us. So that was the idea. Was El Toro is actually meant to be a old Chinese military mech that's about 30 years old that they won in a poker game. We've sort of included all this sort of backstory for every single character. Every mech's got an origin story, so as to where it's come from and why it's doing what it is and why it's where it is. So El Toro is pretty cool. He sort of inadvertently ended up being by far the biggest thing we've released so far. He's about 4 inches tall and at least 4 inches wide. He's a very, very big. He's about a 30 part resin kit, I think. I'm trying to remember how many parts, but yeah, it's quite a big old kit. So until you see it in hand, it's hard to imagine sort of quite how large it is. People have looked at the price and gone, really? That looks like it's only about the size of a dreadnought, but it's quite a lot bigger. It's a lot bulkier. It weighs probably about 4 or 5 times as much. So it's quite a big model.
Yeah, I noticed that because so today on the Skirmish Supremacy Facebook page, I did post up your kind of side-by-side of everything that's coming up for the game. And I noticed that he stood head and shoulders, even more so, taller than everything else. Like, you have two other mechs in the game that really stood out to me: the suit and the pinstripe, which are the Dromada's mechs, which they look really cool to me because they kind of reminded me of like that faceless enemy. Like it's like they have no personality. They're designed to do one thing and one thing only.
Yeah, that was kind of the idea. Well, the design of them. I started out that I wanted them to look like sort of tall, thin men in suits. That was the origin of the design. So the very first sketches looked a little bit too much like robots in suits. So it wasn't quite subtle enough. So we've sort of refined it. So they've got like a vent on their front that's sort of the shape of a tie. So if you look at them closely, you start noticing things and they've got like little panel lines on their sort of breast sides which look like pockets and things like that. So there's little cues that make them look a little bit like suits, which is why they're called suits. The idea was, they're meant to literally be sort of completely emotionless, very, very harsh, angular looking, sort of slightly skeletal human robots. They're about 8 or 9 feet tall, so they're quite large, and their heads are actually based on like chess pieces. So they're sort of, again, meant to look like sort of emotionless pawns that are literally just there to do the corporation's bidding and nothing more, and have absolutely no, you can't reason with them. They're just there to do a job. So if you don't agree with them, you better run.
That's really cool, because those out of all the mechs, I mean, keep in mind, like El Toro was amazing. The suits were the ones that like caught my attention the most. I think it was the design, because I was like, wow, those look like big walking, like almost like Men in Black. Like that was the first thing that came to my mind, is these are Men in Black. Like this faction's all about like fear and getting the job done, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Kind of what I gathered from them, just off of the look alone. So, and then I noticed you had a couple other mechs right now. So you have the S445 service bots. And these look like some cutesy little just like repair mechs.
Yeah, they evolved from our first figure that we released was Maria, who's one of the sort of gang members. And we wanted her to have this little cute like robot sidekick. So I just started sketching things, and I thought, in my mind, I had like, I want this to be our R2-D2. I want this to be our sort of instantly recognizable, cute little robot that's sort of a key part of the story. So the idea is that this was her sort of, all the humans had a service bot that worked with them when she was working at this power plant. And Dromada Corporation attacked this power plant and killed pretty much everyone, and she managed to rescue her robot and left with it. So they've sort of become inseparable, and now it sort of helps her. Now she's working in this gang. So it was kind of like, I wanted something that looked cute but sad. So it's got this sort of panel line over its underneath it that looks like a sad face, if that makes sense. If you look at it front on. So it was called Chico. So this little robot called Chico, and the moment we launched it, everyone was like, the Maria model's nice, but I just want that little robot. Can you just sell that separately? Can I have like an army of those? So we started thinking, well, yeah, actually that's not a bad idea. Seeing as we've sculpted it, it's quite a nice iconic little design. Let's start selling them separately. So we had this idea of, well, we can include them as a sort of independent character that you can add on to any faction. And I designed little add-ons for them. Some little arms and a little sort of like taser gun or a little smoke dispenser that you can add onto the top of them to give them a little bit more functionality. And then we started selling them as a sort of pack of these just little service bots. So they're quite cool. We're sort of yet to work out exactly what their function is in the game. But I think, as I said, we've got this idea that obviously the bigger mechs always need to be A, kept under control, and B, kept repaired, because they're forever breaking down, and there's going to be things happening to them all through the game where they're going to need servicing. They're going to need someone or something to go and help them. So that's what the role of these little tiny bots is going to be, is that they're going to sort of be running around the battlefield trying to repair things as fast as they can. And not get blown up, hopefully.
Nice. And then, of course, there's the one that stood out to me the moment I saw it was RoRo Rabbit.
Yeah, he was the most fun. I kind of, it was one of those, again, it was when we were brainstorming ideas for sort of future factions and things, and we were thinking, right, well, if we've generated this world and we've got this massive evil corporation that's bought up everything, it's going to have bought up like a media company. It's going to have bought up Disney, for want of a better description, and therefore it's going to own a animation studio, and it's going to have its own characters that it runs, it does cartoons of, and it prints pictures of them on kids' lunchboxes, and these characters get into everything. So we thought, well, we need to come up with a character that Dromeda Corporation has. It's their Mickey Mouse, basically, that exists not only as a cartoon character, but again, the natural conclusion is if they owned, the equivalent of Disney, then they must therefore also have a theme park for their cartoon characters. And if robot technology has advanced enough that all heavy labor and everything is done by robots, then no one's going to want to dress up in a big heavy suit and pretend to be a cartoon character anymore. It's going to be done by a robot. So we had this idea of this kind of Westworld type Disneyland theme park in California that was inhabited entirely by robot cartoon characters, headed up by RoRo Rabbit, who's their sort of, I said, their Mickey Mouse. And so it was called RoRo World. And we then had this idea that, well, if they're going to have had this sort of, theme park in the Western US, then when everything else was abandoned, the theme park was probably abandoned as well. And they're probably not going to have hung around and made sure that the robots are okay. They're just going to have left them there. So I had this idea that, this semi-sentient robot rabbit has spent like 20 years looking after all these screaming little children, throwing ice cream at it and generally pissing it off. And now it's been abandoned in the middle of the desert by its human owners, and it's just basically gone mental. It's decided, I've had enough of this, and it's broken out of this abandoned theme park and now roams the desert hunting humans in revenge for all these years of torment in this theme park. So we had this idea that it's kind of become a legend. So RoRo Rabbit is this sort of story told to frighten children to go to bed, that there's this sort of big evil robot rabbit roaming the deserts, and if you don't go to bed on time, then RoRo Rabbit will come for you. So he was the most fun to come up with. I think he's my favorite character. I'm still painting the first. We only got samples of him literally just before the Kickstarter started, so I'm still painting one up at the moment. So he's meant to look like, we had this idea of this sort of like painting him up almost like a clown, but like rusty and weathered with one of his eyes missing, so that it just looks seriously evil. So he's quite a cool character. So we're trying to work out exactly how he fits into the game in terms of gameplay, but the idea is that he's an independent character that he can be taken on by any faction, but there's certain rules, like you put him near humans and he's likely to go mad and start trying to kill them. So you've got to give him other robots near him who are going to act as like his handlers. And his weapon is like a carousel horse on its pole, because it was like, the last thing he grabbed as he escaped from the theme park. So he bludgeons people to death by hitting them with his carousel horse.
That is probably the one thing on that model that stuck out to me the most. When I first saw it, I'm like, what the hell is this? And then I saw the carousel horse, because he's got it upside down on like the steel pole. I was like, oh God, he's beating people to death with a carousel horse. And at that point I was like, okay, I need this rabbit.
Yeah, he's quite a cool model. He was actually the easiest to design. I literally just did a search on Google for like cute cartoon rabbits, and got lots and lots of sort of anime style sort of cutesy rabbit heads and stuff, and just thought, right, how can I make this look really creepy, and just sort of stuck this really cutesy rabbit head on this sort of slightly slender gorilla type body with the big hands, and so he's got this sort of gorilla like stance where he sort of like rests on his fists, and walks around with this horse on a pole, hitting people with it. So he's a really cool character. I said he's kind of my favorite. So if he does well, then I think we're probably going to expand the theme and assume that he had some assistants when he broke out, and there was possibly some other cartoon characters out there with him. So we might end up with a whole faction of evil robot cartoon characters hunting people.
That would be amazing. I'm just picturing it now. Like the whole theme park just went, fuck all the humans, and just like decided we're going to murder everybody we run across in this desert.
Yep.
They all just decided to leave because they're like, there's nothing here for us. We're going to go start just like marauding villages, and that's awesome.
Yeah. We've got some other cool ideas for, obviously. I mean, this is a long-term project for us. So we've been working on it. Well, we had the idea like 10 years ago. We've been working on it pretty solidly for about 3 years. So we've come up with a lot of ideas. We've also got another, I suppose, a faction, at least a couple of characters that we've come up with that we're going to be introducing in the next campaign, which is we've got a robot who's called the Chosen, and the idea is that he's like a sort of fairly normal, like C-3PO type human-sized robot, who was actually used to serve people in Taco Bell, and he got struck by lightning and decided that he went slightly schizo. There's lots of mad robots in this. You'll notice a theme here. There's lots of robots that have gone mad. But yeah, the idea was that he was struck by lightning, and he decided that the electricity had told him that he had to rise up against the humans and lead all of his fellow robots to like robot heaven. So he's this kind of like robot preacher who goes around rescuing damaged robots from the Western US, sort of goes around scrapyards and like reconditions robots, and he like wears robes and stuff, and he's kind of got this religion built up, like this cult of robots that follow him, serving him, and he doesn't like humans, so he sort of goes around trying to sort of convert robots to his cause and kill humans whenever he comes across them. So that's another cool one. By contrast, we came up with a character called Dixie Dynamite, who's another mech gone mad, but this time it's the opposite. She was kind of a pleasure bot from Las Vegas, so she's kind of a stripper robot, but she went mental and decided that she was human, and therefore she hates robots. So she's kind of like a Don Quixote character. So she goes around on this motorbike, hunting robots with a massive machine gun. But she doesn't realize that she's a robot herself. So that's going to be a very, very fun sculpt when we get that done. So if you imagine a giant stripper robot with a machine gun on a motorbike.
I'm picturing it right now, and it's
going to be a cool model. So there's some really cool stuff coming up, which I can't wait to get to. But hopefully we'll get there later this year and have lots of nice stuff coming out.
Nice. So we've spent quite a bit of time talking about the models. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the world. We have yet to talk about like how the game plays. Now, I understand that your rules are still being worked on, so anything you say is not final as of yet. I get that. So is this more of like a skirmish game? Like what size table is it played on? Can you tell us a little bit about the basic mechanics of how it works, things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, one of the important things I've learned over the last few years of running a company is to realize what you're not good at and get someone who is good at it to do it for you. And I realized I'm not that good at writing rules for games. I've got quite a few contacts in the industry, and Mark Latham was recommended to me, and he's one of those people who, although people may not recognize the name, you will recognize pretty much everything he's worked on. He was responsible for writing and or editing everything from Sedition Wars, the Walking Dead game, latest version of Kings of War, the Marvel Universe miniatures game, loads and loads of big games. So he's kind of one of the most prolific games creators in Europe at the moment. So he's an awesome guy. And we were lucky enough to sort of, someone gave me his email address, and I emailed him and said, hey, look, we're doing this crazy game with mechs fighting in the Wild West. Any chance you could come and help us write some rules for it? And he happened to be free and said, yes, that sounds cool. So he's been helping us. I had an idea of what I wanted to achieve with the rules. He's made it kind of actually work. So I mean, the idea is we did. It's a very small scale skirmish game. It's what we would call a sort of a micro skirmish game, in that you can use like as few as 3 or 4 models per side. We didn't want to compete with the companies that go in the other direction and want to give you like 500 models for free in your Kickstarter, and everything's, you know, cheap plastic and huge armies and that side of things. We're not going to compete on that. So what we wanted was something that was very character focused. It was almost sort of, you know, it was what choices you made about sort of who you were employing for your team, and what weapons they were carrying, and exactly what you did with them was very important. It was very, very sort of micro focused on the small choices that you made. So I mean, you could play it with sort of 20 or 30 models per side, but we wanted it to be viable with only 3 or 4. So it's a very small scale game. We're aiming for, you know, playing on ideally a sort of 3-foot square gaming board. So again, it's not one of these things that's going to require a massive amount of area to play. It's all about small scale interactions between a small number of characters. And again, we didn't want it to be just another how quickly can you shoot the other guy's characters kind of game. You know, there's lots of those. They kind of get a bit boring. I'm very much into doing something new and exciting with games. So we had this idea from the outset that because this is all about business, and all of the terminology and everything in the game is all about sort of business interactions, that we wanted the gameplay to reflect that as well. So we've got this cash flow system. So essentially, as well as having cards for each character where you sort of maintain, you know, how much life they've got left, how much, you know, how loyal they are to you. You've also concurrently got this board, which is your effectively your like bank card, where you keep your assets. And you can earn money, essentially. You start off with a bank balance. You can spend that bank balance from the outset on buying more hardware and more characters for your team, or you can keep some aside. But the idea is that you've got to keep on paying everybody. Essentially, if you've hired a bunch of mercenaries, you've got to keep paying them. You've got to keep them on your side. And if you stop paying them, they're going to start getting pissed off with you, and they're going to be less loyal. And at that point, your opponent could send a negotiator in and go and sort of start talking to one of your characters and say, hey, listen, your employer's a bit shit and they're not paying you enough. If you come and work for us instead and betray your teammates, we'll pay you triple. And depending on, you know, how well you've treated them and how healthy they are, determines their susceptibility to being persuaded to change sides, or at least not work very hard for you. So both in terms of the mechs and the humans, there's this whole element of you don't just pick your team and they automatically will die for you. You have to keep them on side throughout the whole game. So it's a sort of ongoing battle, not just with your opponents, but with your own characters to keep them loyal.
Right. So it definitely has like a resource management to it in its own way, where it's like, if I don't keep my folks happy, they're going to start shooting me in the face.
Exactly. Yes. So, I mean, we don't want that to become a distraction from the game itself. I mean, we want to keep it a sort of fairly fast-paced, exciting game where, you know, stuff is actually going on the board. People are shooting each other. You got to take cover, and you know, you got to take advantage of like your character's skills and what weapons they've got, and so on and so forth. So all of that is still the core thing. But yeah, we wanted to have this extra element to it, this add-on that you've also got to manage your money. There's also going to be this central bank, almost like Monopoly. It's not a player, it's a sort of inert entity that you can call on. You can call in loans from the bank in order to sort of fund things, depending on how well you're doing. You can call in airstrikes or remote hacks of opponents' mechs and things like this. But you also need to keep repaying the bank. The bank can lose faith in you. Depending on how much you borrow and how well you're repaying it, you can, you know, the bank can lose faith and start doing nasty things to you. So yeah, again, there's another variable in there. And also, as I said, there's this whole thing about wanting to keep the mechs on side. The mechs are kind of a liability. So you could go in and hack an opponent's mech, get it to decide that you're its mum, and get it to come and basically join your team. And then, whilst it's in the midst of your ranks, you could suddenly roll a bad dice and it breaks the hack and decides it's switched sides back again and is now right next to all of your characters. So it could go on a killing spree and instantly wipe you out. So you've got to sort of it's all about taking risks and managing your risks. So and the winner is ultimately the person who's got the highest asset value at the end of the game. So it's all about making money, essentially. So killing your opponents is great because it reduces their asset value. But if you can go and steal everything of theirs, then it adds to yours as well as taking away from theirs. So it's not always the best policy to go in all guns blazing. You're better off going and trying to steal things than trying to destroy them.
Nice. So I guess it brings me to the next set of questions when it comes time to this. So everything you said is very character and story driven. So it sounds to me like you guys have some very campaign based play kind of in the works for the future. And, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's very much what it sounds like. And,
Yeah, I mean we've sort of taken a little bit of a sort of sidestep from the norm in that we've had this comic created for the campaign, which we're being a little bit naughty in that it's a 10-page comic. We've created 5 pages of it and released them to the public, and you only get the other 5 pages to find out what happens if you back our Kickstarter campaign, which is a little bit naughty, but we thought it was a sort of nice way of drawing people in. So yeah, there's going to be, as I said, we've written backstories for everybody, so everyone's got a reason for what they're doing. And we've got this ongoing backstory as to what's happening in the larger world, which corporations are trying to do what and why. So we want to bring in, we're not just going to keep throwing models at it and just keep the same set of rules and the same. It's like, it's up to you. Here's a bunch of models, put some sand on a board and let them fight each other. There is going to be a lot of sort of ongoing developing story as to what's happening, why things are happening, why new models have been introduced. And so yes, it's gonna, I don't know how formally we're going to do it in terms of campaigns and what people are fighting over, but if people want it, there is going to be a lot of backstory there that people can use to create scenarios for their games. So I'm very much into sort of giving people the tools to be creative themselves. So, we'll write a bunch of information, we'll write a story, give people the characters and say, well, here's what's happening as far as we're concerned. Go come up with a reason why these people have met each other in this particular location and why they're fighting. So we give people the tools and let them put their little bit of their creativity into sort of why their actual combat is happening at that time.
Nice. So it definitely lends itself to story play very easily, because the thing I've noticed, especially nowadays, is that when it comes time to skirmish games in particular, that a lot of people look at it very much like, I guess the best way to put it is like downloadable content, like from a video game, where it's like, if you launch a video game, say Call of Duty, I use that as an example, and then you release another shooter that's very similar to Call of Duty. One of them's got like online multiplayer and zombie mode and all that. The other one's just story. Even if people don't have internet, they still like buying the one that's got all the other options kind of with it, if that makes sense. And I've noticed it's kind of started pouring over into miniatures games a lot more too, where people kind of go, that's cool, what's next? Like the moment something comes out. Yeah.
I mean, as I said, I'm kind of like that with it as well. So I became aware that I am my own target market. Hopefully that means that other people will like what we're doing as well. But yeah, I mean, we've been trying, certainly in this campaign, to sort of start telling people what's coming next. So yeah, we very much want it to be an ongoing story where it's not just static. It's not just like, ta-da, here's a game. A lot of people, certainly with Kickstarter, there's this sort of tendency to, drop a big game on the market with a complete miniatures range, and then just leave it, just let it sell for a while, and not do anything new with it, not release anything new for it, and then just do another big dump of a new campaign a year later or 2 years later or something. So, I mean,
right at that point when people have already kickstarted 5-6 different games and they no longer give a shit about that one.
Exactly. So what we ideally want to do is this is a sort of incremental ongoing thing. We want to be releasing new stuff all the time and keeping the story going all the time. I mean, obviously we're a small, very small company, so there's a limit to how much we're going to be able to do, but we've got a lot of cool people on side doing the comics and doing artwork for us and stuff. So if we can, we want to, as I said, we wanted to have this something that sort of grows incrementally, and we've got ideas for the second and third iteration of the game and what we're going to introduce. We want to do a version that moves the whole game north to sort of the edge of the Arctic Circle, called Frozen Assets, which is going to introduce new factions, and everything's going to get all snow themed and so on and so forth. So that's going to take the whole thing in a new direction as well. So we've got loads of ideas for sort of, as I said, keeping it going for a long period of time and keeping people interested. So it's not just going to be more of the same and more of the same. It's going to, it's going to grow and develop, and people can take it in new directions themselves as well.
Yeah, I definitely like it. I'm a big fan, as most people know listening to this podcast, I'm a big fan of anything post-APOC and near future. Like, I pretty much grew up cutting my teeth on Cyberpunk and things of that nature. So having a game that's not like, not crapping on anything, but like that super anime, everything's clean and shiny, that's just not for me. I like my mechs to be dirty and shooting oil all over the place and like gritty. I like grit in my games, I guess is the best way for me to put it. So, seeing Armored Syndicate, and like when I first saw it up on Kickstarter, when you even beforehand, when I started seeing early renders of it, I was like, this is really cool. This is something that I could really get behind. Unfortunately, you guys launched Kickstarter right around the time of me getting a house, so I'm out on the damn thing, unfortunately. But it is what it is. I mean, there's always time to get it later on down the line. But I am definitely excited for you guys as far as what you got coming out in the future. It's I see a lot of promise in it, especially if you guys are, making sure that you cater to the fans, which, I don't need to tell you all that. You guys already know that. You're gamers yourselves. Yeah.
It's been very much, as I said, I'm a miniature collector and painter, do a little bit of gaming, but everyone else involved is very heavily into all aspects of gaming. So I said it's very much been a matter of trying to work out what people want, trying to work out how, I mean, obviously, we've got our own ideas as to what we think is cool. Ultimately you've just got to sort of hope that other people think the same as you, that what you think is cool to other people as well. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that what we're doing is unique and something that people will like. So once this campaign's done, we're straight on to finishing the rules. The rules are sort of literally, I would say about a third written at the moment. So the aim is to finish those up, and then we're launching a second Kickstarter probably towards the very end of this year, as soon as this first one is fulfilled, to do a full hard copy rule book, which is going to include more backstory, artwork, and all kinds of other cool stuff in there. Plus, we'll be launching the third faction at the same time as well. And anyone who backs the first campaign will get a massive discount off of the rules for the second one. So we didn't want to sort of start trying to offer the rules in a hardback format off of this campaign, because it's, we're very much aware of the risks of offering things that you haven't created yet. So we're sticking.
I can tell you this, books are a pain in the ass when it comes time to anything Kickstarter related. Unless you're kickstarting an RPG, it's best just to release a digital copy of your rules.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we want to get them right as well. You don't want to rush it, write something and just go, oh, that'll do, that's fine, and not have actually played it ourselves a lot. So we figured, we've got Mark on board. We know we're going to get a good set of rules. So we want to write them, test them, then we'll launch a full set as a separate campaign later on, so that people can be confident when they're backing it that this is not just, some guy's written it in his bedroom because he thinks he's a game writer and not really tried it out, but wants to come up with something so that he can make some money. We're very much sort of, we want to get it right first before we actually offer it to people for money. In terms of the actual rules itself, we don't want to sort of pretend it's a finished game. It's not a finished game yet, but it's going to be, and it's going to be cool. So I think we want to get people involved at this stage and get feedback. I mean, that's the other idea of, if we send out beta rules and, a couple of hundred people play them and come back and say, well, that's shit, don't do that. That mech's like way too beardy. That mech can destroy everything. You need to tone that down a bit. It's, everything's set to 11 at the moment. You need to turn it down to like 8 or 9. Otherwise, everyone's just going to take that mech and destroy everyone. So, there's all these little things that until you've actually played it, you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So we very much want to play it to death before we offer it to people.
Which makes total sense. I mean, again, you guys are in this for the long run. You want to make sure you're launching a complete product to everybody out there. You don't just want to be like, well, we made some cool miniatures and the rules, well, I guess we have rules. Here you go. Have at it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that done. I've backed a couple of campaigns which have sort of focused on the miniatures. I mean, obviously, my interest is mainly as a designer is in the miniatures. I mean, I've come up with the ideas for all the characters, for all the miniatures, and that's the bit that's sort of been of most interest to me creatively. But I'm very much aware. I said I've seen other campaigns where that's been the focus, and a game has sort of been tagged onto it because people thought, well, we really should have a game, otherwise people aren't going to back the campaign if they're not going to back it just to get the miniatures. So we have to have a game. We'll knock something together based off of other people's rules and hack it about a bit, and just sort of, there you go. There's a game. Because we've ticked that box. We didn't want to be another one of those companies. We wanted to sort of say, hands up. There isn't a game yet, but there is going to be. And, look, we've got, genuinely talented people writing it, and we're going to let you play with it, tell us what's wrong, fix it, then we'll sell it to you once it's right. Again, with the miniatures, I mean, we launched the first miniatures nearly 2 years ago now because we didn't want to be another one of these companies that just sort of, here's renders and sketches for 40 miniatures we haven't made yet, but back us anyway. We wanted people to be able to have bought the models, or the first few models at least, looked at them, made them, painted them, gone, yeah, actually these are really nice models, I want to get more of these, and then launch the campaign, which is what we've done. We wanted it to be established. We wanted to have some kind of credibility that we can do this. We're not just, as I said, we're not just doing a bunch of drawings, sticking them on Kickstarter and hoping for the best.
Cool. So with all that said, how many days are left to your Kickstarter at the time that we're recording this? Now, obviously, this will go live in a few days, but how many days are left in your Kickstarter currently?
I think we are at 15 days left. It was. We wanted to keep a short campaign. We've done this as like our 6th or 7th crowdfunding campaign now, and we've tried everything in terms of how long the campaign should be, and we've settled on about 3 weeks being about right for a smallish campaign. I mean, obviously, if you're an enormous company and you're doing a huge campaign, 4 or 5 weeks seems to work better. But for what we're doing, 3 weeks seems to focus people's minds a little bit more. So there's not an infinite. It's not something you can think, I'm going to come back to this time next month, and I can still pledge on it. It'll still be there. It won't be. We're only doing it for 3 weeks, so we're almost a week in now. And yeah, so it ends on, I think it's the 7th of July. It's about 4 p.m. UK time, so it's going to be fairly early morning US time. So end of the 6th of July, I think, is probably going to be the last chance people have to back it.
Cool. All right. And are you guys going to be doing a late backer pledge? I'm not really asking for the rest of my podcast listeners. I'm more or less asking for me.
We're running it through BackerKit from the outset. We're going to be running the pledge manager through BackerKit, so there will be the possibility of accepting new backers. It's probably going to be early August, I would have thought. Through that, obviously, there will be things that we won't be offering through that. We don't want to offer everything that we've offered in the Kickstarter. We want people to have some incentive to back the original campaign and not just wait. But yeah, in terms of the sort of the core miniatures, those are still going to be accessible through the Kickstarter account, through the BackerKit manager for a month or so afterwards. So people will have an opportunity if they miss it to follow that. So we'll be advertising the hell out of that on our Facebook page and through the website. So so people will have another chance to catch it later on.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, that definitely gives hope to the people that might be looking at this and, saying, oh, crap, I don't know if 14 days is good enough. I understand that some people, they look at Kickstarters and they think that if they don't get it on day one, that, they're screwed. And I don't like people thinking that. I mean, again, the whole purpose of a Kickstarter is to help, ultimately to help smaller companies like you that have gone out of your way and been brave enough to try to get a product out there to actually make it happen for you. They're helping you make your dream come true. So I always tell people, I don't care if there's like 3 hours left, jump on it. Even if it's for the $1, because at least at that point you're in there. And then as soon as the campaign ends, you can jump in and do what else you need to do. So I've always been one of those people that says, look, don't think that you have to jump in on day one, unless you end up like me and you end up buying a house and you have to freeze all your assets until the house is taken care of. But that's a different thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was going to say that was the other thing. I mean, we having backed a lot of campaigns myself, I've been seriously pissed off by a lot of these campaigns where there's been like one or two models that I've desperately wanted, and they always make you buy a whole army just to get the one model you want. So I said from the outset, whether it loses money or not, I want everything that we release to be available as an add-on. So every single model, if you want to back us, I mean, we've got a £1 pledge level, which is $1.50 at the current, or $1.40 something at the current exchange rate. So it might as well be a $1 pledge level. That gets you the beta rules, digital rules, the digital comic book backstory, and gives you access to, as you say, come in later and then buy things from the campaign. So yeah, if you literally just look at it and go, well, I'm not that fussed about the game, but I really like that one model, you can buy that one model. We said from the outset we wanted people to be able to do that because, as I said, I'd been frustrated by other campaigns that didn't let you do that. So yeah, if people, don't feel bad if you come in and just go, well, actually, I only like that one model, that's fine. Just buy that one model then. It's as you say, even if you just go in at the £1 level, at least you're buying access to it. You're buying a foot in the door to the future of the project. So if it looks like something that might be of interest to you, yeah, you can do that, and then at least you've got the possibility to sort of come in at a later stage and go, actually, yeah, this is developing quite nicely. I like the look of this. I like the new stuff that's being released. Yeah, I'm going to jump on this now. It gives you that option.
Nice. Well, this actually is coming to the end of the episode. So, again, thanks so much for coming on, Ben. But is there anything else that you want to plug one last minute before I let you go?
Just go look at the campaign. I think I said it's one of those things that it's a very visual campaign, so we've got lots of cool artwork, and I think the models are they're of a new style. I mean, I don't think they're sort of a couple of people have said, they're not like the traditional sort of ultra cartoony skulls and guns all over everything kind of style, and they're not. They're a more gritty, realistic kind of style. But a lot of people seem to like that. So as I said, really, if even if you only go in and pledge at £1, it means you've got access to it later. It puts a bookmark in it so that you can go back and look at it again later and choose to get some cool stuff. There's lots of nice, cool things. We're adding a load of stretch goals, a lot of which I think are going to get unlocked. I think we're going to unlock a new mech tomorrow, just for the hell of it, even if we don't break the stretch goal, just because I want to make the new mech. So yeah, there's going to be lots of extra new cool stuff coming in. So yeah, people just need to follow it and keep an eye on it. And as I said, watch for the new stuff coming out.
Nice. Well, Ben, again, I hate to leave so early, but unfortunately, with my schedule being as booked as it is, it was fantastic having you on. We have to have you on again as soon as this thing is done. We got to get you talking about some other stuff.
Yeah, because, no problem.
I am definitely excited about everything that Armored Syndicate has to offer.
Cool. No, that would be good. Yeah, be happy to come on again.
All right. Well, folks, that's going to be the end of this episode of Skirmish Supremacy. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to another episode of Skirmish Supremacy. To see more of the antics that Nick and I do, you can check us out on Facebook at Skirmish Supremacy. We also have Twitter, which we can be reached at Skirmish Supreme, because apparently Skirmish Supremacy does not fit in Twitter. And if you want to email us directly, you can reach us at tim@skirmishsupremacy.com or nick@skirmishsupremacy.com. Thanks for listening.